Hey there, people. Coming at you today. I got a microphone. I'm thinking it's working, so hopefully this fixes the problem. And I played with the settings a little bit. The other one I got just doesn't seem to want to work, so it's going back. Let's cross fingers, shall we? That we have a working audio system at this point. Now, I wanted to come at you today. I did mention in the other video yesterday about the documentary Bad Faith about the Christian nationalism rise. It has a lot of good history in it. I think people should watch it. It will give you a timeline on how we got to Project 2025. All those groups. And of course, guess who's funding them? The rich. Everybody got an agenda. It's a history I know. It piqued some things that, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. And other documentaries or other literature that I've read on the subject of the rise of Christian nationalism. And if you go back, us older folks that grew up when that was really starting to percolate and rise, the right wing and the Christian nationalists kind of co-opted that the Roe versus Wade as far as their talking points to get people into the movement. It wasn't about that. They couldn't come out and say, hey, we think, some people are better than others, and our brand of Christian theology or whatever is one that they think folks are their version is superior. I believe it's like Calvinism that some folks under the umbrella of Christianity. So that's another thing people really need to pay attention to. When they're out there with their talking points saying that they're, Christians are being silenced. No. Their version. And they're not being silenced because we still hear them speaking. It's people don't want to buy into their BS. And they're mad about that. So they want to say they're being silenced. So think about that. All the people screaming, there's this cancel culture, we're being silenced. Do you still hear them? They're just mad because people are getting wise to what their agenda is, and they're just not about that, and they're walking away, or they're just tired of it, or it's just same, or they do their word salad gymnastics, and people are walking away, and they're just not down with it. They're not interested in hearing about it, and it doesn't fit with their values or their views. And they're saying, and they're co-opting that to say they're being silenced. They're not. But it started with segregation in private schools, Christian, quote-unquote, schools. Again, the umbrella of Christianity is large. And this is another thing that people don't bracket it down. Okay, yes, the umbrella is large, but you've got Catholics, Protestants, Methodists, Baptists. You've got all the different sects, the subgroups, underneath that umbrella of Christianity. And the Christian nationalists think they fall into that view because they're more extreme, and we're going to force you to adopt our ideology, and if you won't, we're going to take it by force. I'm oversimplifying, but that's basically their message. You're going to walk our walk, and it's a one-way street, and if you don't, we're going to force you to do it, and if we have to do it by force, we will do so. That's kind of their agenda. And it's a very small group of even the evangelical movement that is trying to throw all of the other folks who fall under that umbrella of Christianity into their bucket, and that's another thing you need to keep in mind when you hear the talking points they're including everybody. And I know a lot of people who ascribe to the Christian faith in whatever form they do, and they're not about that. And that is totally too if you read your Bible against the teachings of their Jesus. So, it is a good, interesting watch, but it did start with segregation, the evangelical, if you remember back in the day, and I remember it. And if you watch the movie Birdcage, that moral majority, I mean, they were playing on that, but it did have a message to it, because that moral majority was, even at that time, still quite large and still very active and still very forefront. And if you want to bring it more up into modern times, if you will, I know that's about 20 years old, but you get my gist. I mean, these titles and whatnot have been playing throughout. But the moral majority, I remember that when I was growing up, and how they just like came out in full force, and they're all this and all that, and believe you me, their morals. Go type in youth pastor. They're all tied in with this evangelical movement. Go type in youth pastor and look that up and see what stories you get. Again, every accusation is a confession. You see a lot of arrest records. That's mostly what it has to do with. But I remember seeing that when I was growing up, and it being a big thing that they were pushing. But it started with segregation. The Supreme Court ruled, no, you can't segregate. Even in private schools. It has to be equal for everybody. And, you had your big, even, televangelist folks out there, Jerry Falwell and whatnot, those types who had their own private Christian, quote-unquote, schools that, look at the pictures, they all white. And the Supreme Court says no, and they got mad. But they can't come out and get people to their cause saying, hey, we're about segregation because we believe we're better than everybody else. Again, here we come back to white power. They couldn't get people on their side for that. So they had to co-opt the abortion movement, the Roe versus Wade. And again, abortion is healthcare, people. It is not some standalone thing that, so oogie boogie, women just do it to go do it. No, they do not. They do not. That's not what that, like, women are flippant about it. No. As a woman, I will tell you, no. It's about healthcare. Because, again, we'll get into women's rights maybe later today. What people don't understand, again, there is no perfect. And a lot of women who do want to grow their families and have children or start a family or whatever, not every pregnancy is case perfect and everything is rainbows and butterflies at the end. Every body is individual, and some have a negative reaction, and those require healthcare to save lives and can, if you save yourself, if you want to go forward and continue on in the future to have a family. So it's healthcare. I mean, we've all started to hear the horror stories that coming out of Texas and things like that of what happens to women, but they co-opted that to get people on their side and reframed. Again, they flipped the script to get people to their movement. And it boiled down to segregation. It's their view that they are better than everybody else, and everybody else should basically live under their rule, and if you don't, then you're evil. So tens of, hundreds of millions of us are evil because we don't subscribe to their ideology and their way of thinking. And that's another thing. Christian nationalism is not a faith, people. It's an ideology. That's why I think the government, the government's been lax in enforcing that about if you're religious, you can't be politically involved and you lose your tax exempt status. And you had a lot of Republican administrations, when they started drawing them in, and that, hey, we'll give you the votes if you give us this. It was a quid pro quo kind of thing. And they weren't going to push them on the tax exempt stuff. I think this administration should go after them. You, a pastor, a priest, whatever, you spouting off that political nonsense about how you think it should be. Tax exempt status gone. You start talking politics in your church or wherever. The one in the documentary reminded me of something from when I was young. I wouldn't necessarily call it church proper, but it was their church. It looked like a converted garage. Maybe it was just a standalone building. I wouldn't call it like a shack or anything, but it was still this standalone building out in the sticks, man. I was going to visit a friend who had moved away, and the new family, the mother had passed, and the father had remarried, and they got into this quote unquote church, real culty to me. I mean, I'm just saying, that was my view on it at the time, and this was 30 years ago, 35 years ago. But it was out in the sticks, and in the documentary, there's the one church, and it just looks like this standalone building. I mean, it's fine looking. It doesn't look as backwoods as the one I went to, of course. It had a little bit more modernization, but you see these people in the documentary, and they're just like sitting on their folding chairs, and some people just look like what, and other people are really listening to the sermon, and there's a lot of violence in the sermon this gentleman is giving. The connotation is there, the dog whistling, the read between the lines, and that stuff should frighten people, because people believe in that. And then this one nice older looking gentleman they interviewed said, we can't go with this administration because, they don't believe like us. I mean, basically coming out and saying, everybody who isn't in our group, in our clique, in what if you don't agree with us, then you're evil. Everybody. And no matter if you feed the homeless, or you save animals, or no matter what good thing you do in the world, basically they're saying, if you don't believe like us, you're evil, and you must be eradicated, is the connotation there. And it really just like, whoa, people walking around with this. And I got that vibe when I went to that establishment back when I was young, and it was very enlightening to me, as far as how the people behaved and everything like that. And I'm sitting there watching, and I'm a complete outsider, but they were just so mesmerized. It was very hypnotic for them, I suppose. I mean, I'm speculating, because they just seemed to, it felt like the sense of self fell away, and critical thinking went out the window. And they had snakes. Yeah, that was it. I'm not afraid of wildlife. Hey, I just had a big, huge snake in my yard. My dogs found it. Tried to shoo it away with a broom, but it didn't want to go nowhere. So I got some water, and I thought, maybe if I spray it, it'll go. No, I didn't like that either. And it turns out, after a couple seconds, I realized it's hottest. I'll get out. So it was just hot, and it just needed some cooling. So I sprayed them, and it was happy and trying to get the water, and then once it was fine, it went away. So yes, always look for alternatives with that stuff, folks. But anyway, they did have that, and you had to walk through to get to the door because, like I said, it's out in the boonies, and all of the vegetation was very overgrown, and which I would say provided some privacy or secrecy. But it was so overgrown, and it was so just congested with all of that overgrowth that you had to, the path to walk into the door, you had to go in between these cages of snakes and go in. And they were those, there was an X-Files, I think, about that back in the day, about snakes, and but that's what you can picture that kind of thing if you're an X-File freak like me. They did do an episode where there was, and it was very much in line with that too. It was just very kind of creepy. Like I said, I'm not afraid of snakes. I'm a country girl. They don't bother me. But just the whole presentation was just very creepy. And then you go in and you're sitting on these chairs and you're doing your thing, and they're jawing on, and the way it was being presented. And yeah, I read the Bible too. The connotation and the presentation of it was very, to me, opposite of the message of whatever they were reciting. And I just see these people just like kind of lulled into this trance of, I don't know. I just can't even describe this, the weirdness to me of it. It was just so strange. Now, in the documentary, there's nothing like that, but that's what that one fellow they were following in his church kind of reminded me of, minus the snakes. But you have that. Needless to say, that day when we left, I called my folks and said, "Come get me." This is out there. I didn't know it went that far. Again, everyone, you do you. Pray to a tree if you want. Nothing to me. Has no relevance, no bearing on my life, who you choose or what you choose to believe in and what you pray to. It's when you start forcing that upon others and saying this way is the only way, which is Christian nationalism, then yeah, I got a problem with that, and I think a lot of other people do. Sorry, dogs again. But it is a very interesting watch, and it has a lot of history in it, and how the movement got co-opted, and how they wormed their way into the Republican Party, and the Christian nationalists slid in there and co-opted it and took it over by force, basically. It was like a hostile takeover of the Republican Party, and how we got to this, and Project 2025 being tied in with the groups who are all under the umbrella of the Council of National Policy or something like that. And who funds them? Rich folk. So again, it's I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of deal, where, hey, we'll fund you, and we'll fund all of this because we want those taxes. We want the tax breaks. We want control too. And if you help us get that, then no, here, throw money at them. It is very enlightening for people who are not familiar with the history. So I do suggest you folks watch Bad Faith. It will give you a little window into how we got here, and how they have slithered their way into things, if you will. under the disguise of religion. But again, when you preaching about politics, it ain't religion anymore. That's ideology. That's a movement. That has nothing to do with religion. You're using that as a disguise, as a cover. And it's not. It's just not. A person who follows their faith in whatever form or fashion that they want, that is their philosophy, religion, however you want to textualize it, label it, or whatnot. But when you start taking that and perverting it to a negative end that is totally and wholly against the teachings that you swear you live by, well, that's something else. That's more ideological and not a practicing faith. And again, the government might want to get on that. Hey, you spouting all this stuff, you're supposed to be talking about your religion, but you're talking about politics and mixing it with that. Maybe you don't need your tax exempt status. Just saying. Yeah, the churches should be taxed too. They got more money than God, and I don't see them. All I see them doing and taking that money is using to spread their message, which, again, peace be with you. You do you, but we'll help the poor if you listen to our sermon, if you come over to this side. No, it shouldn't come with a catch. Ain't nothing in the Bible, if you read it, it didn't come with a catch. They've attached a catch to it. Oh, we'll help you. We'll help the poor if you follow us. I mean, we even have, you see that now, that there's a lot of private helping with the poor and the homeless and stuff, and it's religious based, and you kind of have to go along with that. If you want any assistance, that's blackmail, and that's not in the Bible. So I wanted to throw that out there. I did watch it last night, and it is very good, and it's very educational. Give people a brief snippet, if you're not into the history. I wanted to break it down on how one shot across the bow kind of moment, an event in time, got them to sit back and strategize and plan how they were going to get their agenda through and get it going forward. Because, again, the majority doesn't want what they're spouting. And it all boils down to they don't want their feelings hurt, because segregation is just plain wrong. They know they can't sell that message, even though they believe it's right. But this world of Christian nationalism and the far right extremism, it's a grift too. It's a money making proposition. So that's another thing to look at. It is a money maker, bilking all these folks and lulling them into this ideology. And some are low income folks, low information, and they're just bleeding them dry, and they're laughing all the way to the bank in their private jets and their big houses. And it boggles my mind how people keep throwing that at them. Like, money don't buy you a place in the kingdom, if that's what you believe. It's not like the one with the most toys in the end wins, or if you pay them, it will save your soul. No, you just did the opposite. Because what all of religions, and I have read them, I had a time in my life that I was coming off of a bad time and rehabilitating myself as a teenager, and I had my mother said I took 6 months and sat in my room, and I just wouldn't come out. And I did. I was in there for months. All I did was read. I read religion. I read philosophy. I even started reading the encyclopedias that week because I ran out of things, I read everything. But I did go into the religions worldwide, from Christianity to Confucianism to Taoism to Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslim, you name it. I read it. And I read philosophy, the old masters from, Plato, Socrates, all of that. And the one basic thing I think we could say about religion, if you really want to get right down to it, what you believe is a way of life. I mean, you can break those values down into subgroups and this, that, and the other and be more specific, but the one biggest thing across everything is just be a good human being. You could boil it all down to that. Just be a good human being. If you're a good human being, the morality is baked in there. In my view, personally. Then you don't need to be taught what morality is, because if you behave as a good human being, then your morality should be there. And I'm not saying if you don't have morality, you're not a good human being. Not at all. I've done some crazy stuff in my life. I was a wild child. But that didn't mean I wasn't at heart good. I was just learning my way. And religion likes to give you rules to follow and guidelines and punishment if you do or you don't. And it's just very punitive in some ways, in some areas. And I don't know that that's a good path. I mean, it's up to everybody to choose. But life is learning, and you have to fall so you know how to get back up. You have to you have to fail, because those are teaching moments. You have to fall because that's a teaching moment. And I think to put it in some box structure of these rules you must follow in whatever tenet of religion or philosophy that you do follow, I think it's very limiting. And I think that, I mean, these are all just my personal views. It's just be a good person, be a good human being. Like I said, I've done questionable things or bad things in my life. Doesn't mean I wasn't a good person, but I was just learning to find my way, as we all do. And I really don't believe, it doesn't excuse you. You have to own your mistakes. You have to own where you were wrong. And maybe you had a wrong mindset, maybe whatever, but I think as long as you learn and you grow from that and you do better, you are your own forgiveness. If you believe there's some kingdom in the sky, peace be with you. That's your choice. But I have no problem with anybody following what they follow. The only time I do have a problem with it is when you are forcing it by whatever means, whether it be saying, oh, the catch is we'll help you if you do this, or we're going to take it by force. I mean, yeah, when you start to get into that, throw a negative connotation on the back end of it, and it must be this way as an absolute, yeah, that I have a problem with. It's very hard to pick through that mess too, because there's a lot of word salad and gymnastics that different folks in religion, whatever sect, use to get you to go in that direction. But what they did really talk about too was everybody touting, and they're coming out and saying it now, this is Christian Nation. No, it's not. Were the people that the founders following some form of Christianity? Sure. but you had the Puritans, you had the Quakers, you had the Protestant, you had different sects under the umbrella of Christianity. And I think the reason that the founders were like, there shall be no established religion and no laws made to do that, in the Constitution itself, it's there. I think they did it because there were people who followed different tenets of the Christian faith, and to not behave in such a manner as to force it on folks, because that was the tyranny, quote unquote, they felt they were escaping because of the church in England, saying you have to follow this, and it was that line, and if you didn't believe it, you weren't right, yada yada. I'm oversimplifying, but they didn't like that they couldn't practice their way. And if they bring it over here in the founding of this country, then that's just doing the same thing they came from, and that's to them was a form of tyranny. And so you pray how you pray, you do what you do, and that's why they did that. So these people in the Christian nationalist movement, or even like Josh Hawley getting up and saying yes, or MTG, or any of them saying, yeah, I'm a Christian nationalist because this is a Christian nation. No, it's not. That's what you want it to be, but the vast majority does not. And you don't like that. And you want to force your will and your rule upon others. And it's even in the founding documents. And even back in the day, I mean, it's in the Federalist Papers. They're online now. You can go read them. You can read the private letters. You can read the correspondence. You can read all of these things. You can even read every piece of paper that Lincoln ever touched online in like 8 volumes. It's on there. You can go find that stuff and you can read it. Now, back in the day, when it was the library card days, most libraries had a copy in some form or fashion that you could read. And now it's a lot more accessible. So people should be able to check them when they say this is a Christian nation. No, say, look, right here. Here's A, B, C, D on why it's not. Number 1, in the Constitution. Number 1. Now, did every founder or every person involved in that movement in the formation of this nation agree with that? No. I mean, some did want it to be Christian-based. But again, Christian is a broad umbrella that encompasses many sects and divisions. And I'll throw this in there. If that religion was so absolute, why is there so many different subgroups? Why is there so many sects? Why did so many break off if it was so absolute? You got, again, Catholic, Protestant, Methodist, Baptist. You see what I'm saying? If it's so absolute and it's so supreme and everybody can get around it, why you need to break it down into all these groups? Oh, it's the basic message. Well, then you should all be one group, should you not? That's because everybody, that word interpretation is a loaded word. Everybody interprets in their own fashion. Sometimes to the positive, sometimes to the negative, but I'm one of those people, when I read, how it comes across to me is how it reads, not what I want to read into it. There's where your interpretation comes in. This is why I have a big problem with SCOTUS and that word interpretation in the law and all of that. So, I mean, think about words do have meaning and how loaded some of them are. When it comes to the law, you're supposed to walk in neutral, but if you keep throwing that interpretation word out there, then that says to me you already come in with a preconceived notion and a bias, and that applies to any it applies to religion as well. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind when people say these things about, oh, it's a Christian nation and this, that, and the other. You know, like I said, I boiled down to, and it mostly comes from Buddhism, I think. Just be a good person. I mean, I'm not on with the meditation and everything. I tried. It doesn't work. My meditation is not sitting under a tree for 10 freaking years and thinking on things. My meditation is my plant therapy, or like when I was driving back on my trip yesterday and I was seeing those signs and me forming the podcast in my head kind of thing and thinking, and it brought up other thoughts. And my meditation is different. You can meditate your own way. Again, when you start throwing down a lot of rules or must do or whatever, then you have to maybe think outside that box a little bit. I suggest Jiddu Krishnamurti if you can find any of those online. eBay's got cheap ones. You got to get used to the style because they're transcribed from talks that he gave, lectures at various locations. So he's talking to a crowd. So you have to get in like as if you're sitting there, and you have to read it like that, because that throws some people off, and it took me a little while, a couple of chapters to get into it, and the way they break it down. And there's some other folks that wrote about him and his way he spoke about life and everything. And even I think he was brought up and raised in that whole guru culture, and he just was like, nah, I'm not down with this. It kind of conflicts. It does, why is there got to be all this when it's just looking inside yourself kind of thing? And he broke away, and he was like, no, I'm going to go talk about my own thing. And it's very wise. It's very wise. It gives you introspection. I found, and that's more a philosophical way of looking at your life, not so much a religious-based way of looking at your life. I mean, for me, other people can have their own views on it. It's just about a way you choose to live. And I found him, some book I was reading had a quote from him, and the quote really grabbed me. That even though it was short and it was like one sentence or two, it just like, wait, I get that resonated with me on a deeper level. And I went and looked him up, and you can read, there's just Jiddu Krishnamurti online at .com. You can go read some of it that way as well. Again, a lot of these things are online. You just have to find them. And it was, I started reading, and I was like, wow, I was interested in it. So I ended up buying, I get them on the cheap on eBay. But I started buying them, and I was very impressed. I still have several over there to get to because I bounce around on what I'm reading. But it is very enlightening once you get used to the style of it and the messages he's trying to convey. It causes you to look very introspectively about yourself and how you believe and what you believe in living your life, and higher powers and this, that, and the other. So, I mean, that is totally a choice, up to anyone. But the Christian nationalist movement, and I'm just going to call it white Christian nationalism because that's what it is. You don't see a lot of people of color in those groups, do you? And I think it's interesting, and people should watch Bad Faith. There are other documentaries. See, I flub too, all the time. Media. I went back and that's another thing. I did review some of mine, like make sure they sounded good, or, but, whatever for what I was working with, and everything came across okay. And I was like, oh, I flubbed. So, yeah, we all do it. I'm 50. Come on now. Media need to get over itself. I have another one on that later. But because it's starting to subside a little bit, thankfully. Some people just won't get off that boat, though. All right, that's a hill you want to die on. Go ahead, but we ain't gonna listen to you. But anyway, back to the documentary. There are others that are in that vein that are I have seen over the years that are interesting to watch, but this one is very timely. Bad Faith is as far as how this movement and this minority of people have just tried to do a hostile takeover, basically, of the Republican wing, and co-opted to use it for their own ends, with big money behind it for their own agenda as well. It ain't none of it good, folks. It is about power and control. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not down with control. No. I'm just not. And I think that if people were more aware and educated about what this movement stands for, and I mean, they even got up like on January 5th, I think it was, and January 6th of 21. And, you know, we're talking about taking things back by violence. They're not being heard. And if you listen to their wording, it's just they didn't get their way, and they're just throwing a big, huge temper tantrum. And I'm not trivializing it, because theirs was one of violence on the back end. But it was just the wording, and if you listen to them, they're just mad that the rest of the people saw past it and were like, no. And they want you to see their way. And they know too, their population is going to age out at some point. And they're so mean and so nasty about it too. You hear like Charlie Kirk and all them. And they don't want women to have rights. They don't know. And like that one guy now in North Carolina, lieutenant governor, people need killing and all that. They're so mean. And that was in a church. And they clapped. Like, oh, people. Come on now. If I would have been sitting there, I would have spoken up. Like, what are you talking about, son? Maybe that's your view, but you in a church. Like, you're deviating from the teachings a little bit. It's because somebody in your Bible got persecuted terribly doesn't mean that, oh, an eye for an eye. You know, that's Old Testament. That, you know, New Testament was a little bit different, but just because somebody do that to you don't mean you go do it back. I mean, sometimes there is a line, you know, people poke you long enough, you gotta poke back, you gotta defend yourself, but you know, theirs isn't all violence. It's all violence at the back end of it. And it just, I think more people need to be aware of it, because they done polls. The majority of folks, you know, vast over 70% do want no parts of Christian nationalism. So that shows you how small this minority of folks is, that they've co-opted other movements and sucked them into theirs. MAGA, all of that. And it hasn't moved the needle much, but it's just moved the needle on where people's loyalty lies. But it is a minority, and I think if the majority of people who truly could see this for what it is, it's just a way to inflict power and control on others. Ruling, not representing. I think more people would be like, what? And be wanting to kick that to the curb. I mean, even people within their own movement, you see those who have gotten away from it, being in that bubble of that movement, and they get away a little bit, and things start to not jive for them, and some people will excuse it away or justify it with whatever, but there are those who have gotten out of that movement and been like, wait a minute, I'm exposed to this over here. Politics Girl had one of those folks on there a few weeks ago. One of the gentlemen in the movie works with Reverend Barber, who I admire very much. I admire him very much. He was on the Jon Stewart show there a couple weeks ago, speaking a lot of truth to power. You know, yeah, his is wrapped in the message of religion, but it is basic tenets of just be a good person. Like pointing at the higher ups who are taking education and women's rights and children's, you know, penalizing children with, you know, not helping them, and like the school lunches and this, that, you know, he's poking the bear, saying, look, if you stop being mean to people, you're yelling at us because we're calling you on it, and you don't like that. Well, stop doing this. If you stop, we'll stop. And I think that that's what everybody needs to take away, that if people would stop trying to rule people and tell them how to live, then we as an activist movement would stop going, hey, don't try to take our stuff, and we won't, you leave it be, and we won't poke at you back. I don't like that we do, but, and again, that negative connotation they've given to women women's lib and feminism, as if it's negative. No, we just wanted our rights. We just wanted equality under the law. You don't want us to have that. The Christian nationalist movement is big on that too. So a lot of things are wrapped up in that, and you can see if it started with segregation, and they co-opted Roe v. Wade, and they've taken that forth. But there's a lot of nastiness. They're just mean. It's like holding on to that anger and bitterness. It's the same amount of energy to be good. You know what I mean? You can be mean and nasty and negative, but the same amount of energy it takes to be a good person. So why you want to stay wrapped in that vitriolic state and that high anxiety and stress? We have a brief window of time. We're a speck in the sand of the universe. We only get a brief moment. Well, why you want to waste it on this? Why not just enjoy your life and live it in a more peaceable way? Because we don't have forever. And I mean, like I said, you can believe what you want to believe, and however you choose. But when it is imposing and harming others, then maybe you need to reevaluate that way. Because, I mean, the majority of us, we don't care what you do. I don't care what anybody else does. Again, I said about the signs. I have a neighbor who has an America First sign, and the eagle with the white and the red, white, and blue, and the stars. And I walk by it every day. I'm not judging them, but do they know where the America First thing comes from? Ku Klux Klan. It's like Make America Great Again came from Reagan. Trump co-opted all that stuff. America First comes from the Klan. And just the emblem itself got a little German on it. And I'm not talking about modern day German. I'm talking about 30s German. It's got a little bit of German on it. It's like, I don't know if people connect the dots to what they're following or what they're supporting. Again, in this white Christian nationalist movement. I mean, maybe he does. Maybe he fully knows, and maybe that's who he is. Whatever. But sometimes I have to wonder if more people's eyes were opened and they get out that bubble, if they would see that, wait, this isn't all that. So, it is a good documentary. I do suggest you go take a listen or a watch. I believe Amazon Prime, like I said, it's on YouTube. I don't know about other streamers. But it is worth a watch. And share it and get it out there to folks and do your own review. Because it is a bit, I mean, take the music out. And it's supposed to be frightening, bring that drama. But it just, the whole notion of what they started with and what they've done it is frightening. And it is very exclusive of others. But they want to include you, again, with that catch. If it's blackmail, is what it is. But, in my view, I mean, they did it with Trump too. Hey, we'll give you our votes if you give us our judges. We got a list from the Federalist Society. He's like, yep. Man, step on his own mother for $1, I swear to God. But Some people broke away from that because they were like, no, this is not the teaching. He's reformed. No, he's not. You listen to him talk lately? No, immigrants are fine as long as they are from good countries, white countries. Little racism, don't you think? Anyway, I did watch it and it was very good. So as far as giving those bits of information people may need to, again, inform yourself to make better choices. And if you think it's hyperbolic or it's just overreaction that's coming, no, it's not. I told you. Before, they didn't have all the people in the 30s in places in the levers of power. They weren't strategic enough then. They've learned from their mistakes. And they got it now. And they want to impose a minority on a majority. And so if that doesn't get you to the voting booth, I don't know what will. Again, we the people participate. It's up to us to stop that from spreading and taking over our country and igniting that in others. Because it will. It was tried before, it failed. It just went underground. It's still out there in the world because mediocre men with a lot of ego and vanity and hubris about them. And then you got the women riding them coattails. I don't know what that's all about, but I think it's a self-preservation. And I think a lot of them, some of them believe it, but it's like, why? Those very men that you're elevating are the same men that will hold you down. And they'll walk over you minute one and throw you under a bus if it don't suit them. I don't know why women don't wake up to that if they're on that train. I don't get it. And maybe they truly do believe that rhetoric and way of thinking, but I would suggest coming out that bubble too. So yeah, go check it out. It's pretty good. It's educational, it's enlightening, and you can go look up everything in there. But I would suggest the Federalist Papers. There's various ones that do have to do with religion. There's, again, founders and people in that adjacent letters, correspondence. Some agreed, some disagreed, but that was the dialogue and that was the dynamic. And the majority decided that, hey, look, everybody, like I said, you got all the different sects, we can't make them be one, and that's just like what we came from, so we have to leave it open for people to decide. Or they would have probably anarchy from out of the gate if they said, oh, this is the rule, you must follow this. I think they would have had anarchy, and they were having a lot of immigrants come over and stuff, and they had a lot of different views and things like that. So the founders did have a long game goal going on with why they said this is not it is a religious country, as in far as you can practice whatever religion you want, but there is no one true religion that you must follow. As far as Christian nation, no. So go check that out. See what you think. If you've got any comments you'd like to leave, please do so. So I keep forgetting to say like, subscribe, share, comment. Definitely subscribe. I was thinking about it while I was watching the flick last night. I was like, oh, if I had enough subscribers, we could do like a live watch party or something. I know I can't put that on there, but I could at least have the audio going. And like how Sparks does with the clips, I can at least do that. And like play the clip or play whatever part and then stop it and then comment, and we can have a discussion about that. I was like, I need the 50 subs for the live stream. I would really like to do something like that to see what other people think about things. going on in the media and whatnot. And I don't have the software yet, and I'm still learning it because I just got the darn microphone working. So again, I'm not techie, folks. I'm doing the best with what I got in the time I have. So I did catch up on the news a little bit, so it seems to be sort of quieting down. A couple of people still out there jawing away, but we'll have that on another talk. So again, like, subscribe, share, all of that, and you have a good weekend. Stay cool. It is hot again today. Peace out.